Hello and welcome to today's video. This is my third video in the alphabet book recommendations video series that I'm doing, and therefore as it is the third video we are up to letter C. So all the books we're going to be talking about today will begin with the letter C and therefore complete that space for the alphabet challenge. If you somehow made it here and you're watching this video and you've got no idea what the alphabet challenge is, essentially A to Z, you've got it right down and you try and read a book that starts with each letter of the alphabet and you just fill in each square. Most people I'm aware of, myself included, restart this challenge at the start of a new year and try to complete it within 1 year. I've now done this challenge for 3 years and last year I was one letter off being able to complete it. So it's definitely not easy, but it's a bit of fun. I enjoy it. I do enjoy giving it a go. And I guess the only like rule that I'm aware of that like most people stick to is books that begin with the or A don't count towards like letters. So for instance, The Cruel Prince doesn't count for C because it starts with the, but also doesn't count for T because the doesn't count. And the same for books that begin with A. So yeah, that's the only rule that I'm like properly aware of that people stick to. There might be others, you can make up your own rules, you can basically do it how you want. It's not policing anyway, it's just a bit of fun. So this video and this video series is just me giving my recommendations of books that I've read and enjoyed and I think are like decent recommendations that you can read to fulfill the letter we're speaking about. So for this video, C, and all the books that I talk about are either standalones or first books in series, so you can just pick them up and start them. They're available to everyone. All the books are over a variety of genres and I will try my best to explain to you why you might enjoy the books I'm recommending. If there are any C books that I don't recommend and you think are good recommendations, leave them down below. Let's make the comments even more like info-y and have way more recommendations there as well. And for today we're just going to talk about book recommendations beginning with the letter C. So for today I've got 6 books that I'm going to talk about, and these are mainly in the genres of YA fantasy. That does seem to be very prevalent with the letter C. And then we also have kind of like a classic horror-esque book and like a psychological horror book. So those are like the 3 genres that we're really looking at. Unfortunately the genre range isn't as broad as I'd like to make it and as wide a range as the first couple of videos have been, but hopefully there'll still be something that you'd like and enjoy within this. So let's just get right into the books. The first book I'm going to be recommending is City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. Now don't get me wrong, I don't think that this is like 5-star amazing when you talk technically and all of that jazz, but this is like a YA classic. This is probably one of the series that properly got me into reading again when I was a teenager, and I mean I've reread it recently and I don't think it's as amazing, but depending on your age and kind of like the nostalgia feel, I feel like this could be a really good one. It's really quick, really easy to read. Is it as amazing as a lot of other things that you can pick up nowadays? No, but one, it can be a reread. You can include reread, so you could reread it for the nostalgia factor, and 2, I personally still go back and read older series that might not necessarily be the best, but I think say a lot from like where the newer current books are coming from. So yeah, I think it's a really decent option. It's very classic YA. It has a lot of tropes in, but before the tropes necessarily became popular, and it's just a bit of a weird wacky series that I'm very glad that I read, so I didn't want to not mention it for this video. So yeah, I think you'd enjoy it for the nostalgia factor or for like the interest in where the genre came from factor, or just a lot of people read this series because it's got a lot of questionable things going on in it and a lot of things that people question. Let's leave it like that. Let's just, yeah. The second book that I'm recommending is a YA fantasy, but I think it verges on sci-fi as well, and that is Cinder. This is the first book in the Lunar Chronicles series. It is about Cinder, a main character who is a cyborg based in New Beijing, and book 1 is a Cinderella retelling. I don't think you need to know more than that, honestly. Like, it's a Cinderella retelling, but our main character is a cyborg and there's other like robots and things going on in this world. Each book is a different retelling and expands further and further on this world. I think Cinder is a great stepping stone to get into this world and a really decent way to start, but personally I feel like the further on you read, the better the books get as well. But this was so interesting and so new, and like I reread this last year I want to say, and it still held up. I felt like it was still really good, it was still really interesting. And even though it's a retelling, so you do know like the basics of where it's going to go if you're familiar with the Cinderella story, it does a lot of interesting things and a lot of things you might not expect, and our main character is a very interesting character to follow and see what's going on. So yeah, I would 100% recommend this to just anyone who loves YA fantasy or YA sci-fi really, or anyone who loves retellings. Then we have a more recent one that I picked up, but this is actually a classic. Like loads of people love this series, and this is Caraval. This is the first book in the trilogy, and I only read this recently and I had very low bars for this. I did not expect much going into it, but I was really pleasantly surprised. I really felt like this held up. I really felt like it was a very easy to follow story, a very interesting set of characters to follow, and it opened up this world in such a way that I just can't wait to pick up the rest of the books in the series. And it still is a series that, like, in my mind I'm actively wanting to pick up and like continue on with, even though it is like, you know, I am moving away from the YA genre and it does take more for me at my current age for books to grip me how they might have easily done 10 years ago. So yeah, we're essentially Caraval. It's like a massive like museum circus type of thing, but set within a town, but a town that's built. And we follow our main character who goes there, and the sister gets stolen. Is it stolen? Yeah, the sister's like the prize for winning the competition. So she needs to win the competition to find her sister. And it just goes on and goes on from there. And it was so much fun, so interesting, so descriptive, and very easy to like see this world and this world that we're building. And then I hadn't noticed I'd done that, but we do actually technically have another retelling, another Cinderella retelling. This is Cinderella is Dead, and I just really enjoyed this when I read it. So it's fantasy, it's a fantasy retelling of Cinderella, but Cinderella is more like a known thing. Like Cinderella happened, the fairy tale, as in like it happened and like has caused traditions. And this is like a queer book and a queer retelling, where we kind of see that even though this big thing of Cinderella finds her prince and all that, you know, happy ever after, it's not always leading that way. The very last line of the synopsis is just, pushed beyond breaking by a society that denies everything she is, Sophia sets out on a journey that will remake her world into one where she gets to choose. And it's just, it was great. I was hooked. I read this all in a day, maybe two. I think it was all in a day. It really got me. Really, it was stunning writing, a really interesting story. It's a standalone, like a standalone fantasy. I don't think you find many of those, but it's just really interesting, and it was interesting to see how it worked as like a retelling, but in a retelling where we weren't retelling the main story, we were like expanding on from that. Really enjoyed it. Would definitely recommend to anyone who likes contemporary or fantasy. Honestly, I think it'd work for both, but also anyone who likes like an interesting twist on these retellings. So those were all the like YA fantasy-esque ones. Then we have like a classic horror. I don't know if I'd call it horror, but when it came out it was classed as horror, is basically why I like don't know exactly what to call it. I don't think it's like horror in the fact that it's going to scare anyone in like today's day and age, because we've seen it been done before, and I don't want to tell you much about this. This is Carmilla, and if you haven't read anything about it, I would just leave it as that. Like, I honestly wouldn't even read the synopsis. I wouldn't even look into it more, because I feel like even what it's compared to, it's like I'm literally covering it up on the front page, I think gives it away, because we really don't find out what's going on in this book until kind of like the reveal kind of stage. But how it's marketed today makes it quite obvious. It was still really enjoyable, even though I knew like what this was, knew what to expect going into it. It was still a really enjoyable read. It was a very short read. The audiobook was great. I listened to the audiobook on Scribd, and I've got a feeling it's about 2 hours. Like, it's a really short audiobook, and it really captured me, and I could really see it was very descriptive and where we were, what was going on, and it was interesting. I think if this was rewritten today, it would be a lot longer. We'd see a lot more perspectives, we'd see a lot more going on and actually get to know our characters more. But for what it was and for it being a classic, it's probably like the nicest, easiest classic I've ever read. And then last but certainly not least, we have a kind of like psychological horror thing, and that is Comfort Me with Apples. Now, if you look up my rating on Goodreads, I think I only gave it 3 or 3.5 stars, but I do want to make clear, just in case it's not, I did write it in the thing, but I was spoilt for this. I'm not going to tell you anything about this. I literally don't even think I'm going to... No, I'll just read the synopsis because I feel like that's safe enough. But I was spoilt for this, and I do feel like I probably would have guessed what was going on. Everyone I've recommended this to that has read it and got to follow along and figure out the twists along the way has really like loved it. So on the inside we have Sophia was made for him, her perfect husband. She can feel it in her bones. He is perfect. Their home together in Arcadia Gardens is perfect. Everything is perfect. It's just that he's away so much, so often. He works so hard, she misses him, and he misses her. He says he does, so it must be true. He is the perfect husband, and everything is perfect. But sometimes Sophia wonders about strange things. Dark things. The look on her husband's face when he comes back from a long business trip. The questions he will not answer. The locked basement she is never allowed to enter. And whenever she asks the neighbours, they can't quite meet her gaze. But everything is perfect, isn't it? So good. I'd really recommend it. Like, even if you're just starting out, because like I haven't read much in these genres. Like, I haven't, like thrillers, horrors, like I'm pretty new to them. I don't read a great deal in them, and this was great for me. But like, it's also got so many like good rave reviews from like everyone. I mean, I'm sure there's people who don't like it, but I think it's very interesting and a very interesting... I can't even finish that sentence because I don't want to risk spoiling it, but there we go. I really enjoyed it. I would really recommend it. And those were all the books. That is it from me today. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Again, if you have any recommendations for book recommendations, leave them down below. Do give the video a like if you liked it. Subscribe down below if you'd like to see more content like this, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye!